few minutes.
Let's take you back now to 1993. Ever since black teenager Stephen Lawrence was murdered then, his family have been campaigning for justice. Now, 18 years later, two men will be sentenced this morning for the racially motivated stabbing.
Stephen's case and the subsequent mishandling of the police investigation forced the UK to face the issue of racism and led to changes in social policy and the law.
Well, Stephen's mother, Doreen, was one of the driving forces behind that change, and she told the BBC how she managed to keep going through almost 2 decades of setbacks.
People say to me, well, you know, how strong you are. I don't think I'm strong. I don't think I'm strong at all. I just think, you know, there's something there carrying me and helping me through. So I'm not doing it on my own. I don't forgive the boys who killed Stephen. Because at the moment, no, because, you know, they don't think they've done anything wrong. They took away Stephen's life. And there's nothing in them, in their behaviour or anything to show that they regret what their actions have done and the pain that it's caused us as a family.
Doreen Lawrence. Let's talk now to Paul Anderson Walsh, who's Chief Executive of the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust, and he's a friend of the Lawrence family. He joins us from a Westminster studio. And our Home Affairs editor, Mark Easton, is here with us on the sofa. Good morning, to you both. Mr. Anderson Walsh, we'll start with you first, if I may. We heard there from Doreen Lawrence in a very effective and eloquent speech she made yesterday as well, but justice not entirely done in the eyes of the family because 3 suspects who accused of taking part in the attack still at large.
Indeed so. So, I mean, it's a partial justice in that sense, but justice nonetheless. After 18 years of campaigning, at least we're in a position this morning where Doreen is able to have some kind of a closure on this subject.
Yes, Doreen Lawrence saying yesterday the day could have come 18 years ago had the police who were meant to find my son's killers not failed so miserably. Was there ever a case in those 18 years where Doreen or Neville thought we just can't keep fighting this?
You know, I don't think there was particularly. I think that it's extraordinary how much love gives us courage. And Doreen particularly has the most extraordinary amount of courage, and she's the most indefatigable woman. She says she's not strong, but I tell you, she's resolute. And I don't know necessarily if she really believed that she would see the day where there were some convictions, but I think that the chance of her letting up were not very high, I have to tell you that.
There have been significant changes to the law and to police procedures and to attitudes in general, but has enough changed to make sure that this kind of case does not happen again?
Well, do you know, I think there's 2 issues, and I think they're separate issues. I think one is an issue around criminal justice, and I think it's fair to say that there's been some progress made in that area. Macpherson, of course, made a great contribution to that, and clearly we've made some progress in the last 20 years. But I think the other side of it is the story about social justice, and certainly the Stephen Lawrence Trust is concerned with both of those bookends, the criminal justice piece and the social justice piece. And the truth is that had Stephen escaped that fatal injustice and then the subsequent investigation that followed all of that, which has brought the case to the public's eye, he still would have faced these extraordinary deadening social consequences and these social barriers and obstacles that still exist today. And so whilst we have made some progress, and let's be clear on that, we have made progress around the criminal justice issues, that landscape has changed. But frankly, this sort of social justice topography is a landscape that really does need to be changed, because still obstacles are in the way of young people like Stephen entering into the professions. And Stephen's desire was to become an architect, but there are barriers to entry, not just to architecture, but law and finance and all sorts of other professions that you're not just barred from because of the colour of your parents' skin, you're barred from because of the colour of your parents' money, and that isn't acceptable either.
Well, how can you go about changing that, then?
Well,
I mean, that's a very long-term commitment, isn't it, to change?
Yes,
have that
it
big
is.
Societal change.
Yes, that's right. That is societal change, and I think that if you were to ask Doreen Lawrence what she would like to see as the legacy for Stephen, I think she would tell you, and she would be right to say this, that the Stephen Lawrence Trust was established not so much to pursue the case of criminal justice, because criminal justice is something that is really very much the agenda of the family, but that the Stephen Lawrence Trust, and thus Stephen's legacy, is around this social justice piece. And how we do it, as slow and as painstaking as it may seem, is we do it by watering the seed of ambition, one Stephen at a time. And we talk about the trust, the redemptive thing that's happened for Doreen particularly, is that she lost one son, but she now has this extended family of what we call the Stephens, who are the beneficiaries of the legacy of Stephen. And frankly, we will have to, as cynical as this may sound, the memory of Stephen's dead body wedges open the door of opportunity for other young people from our community, for them to be able to get a hearing. Young people like Stephen, good, decent people that lack access but lack opportunity, but make up for that in terms of resilience and character.
Paul, thanks very much. Paul Anderson Walsh joining us from Westminster. Mark Easton, our Home Affairs editor, listening to that. He was talking there about one of the legacies of the case. The legacy overall, though, for all of us in Britain, what do you think that's been?
I think Britain has become much more tolerant of racial difference. I think it's become less tolerant of racial prejudice, less tolerant of racial prejudice. I think we are a different place. I think actually it almost happened the other way. I think it started as your guest was saying, within the criminal justice system, within the police, looking at its systems, its protocols, its design, as it were. How can we design out racism in what we do? The institutional racism that McPherson talked about and identified. That then spread out into a wider arena, really, that all public bodies had to think, how can we promote racial equality? There's a duty on most public bodies to do that. Now, that's quite a big thing. And a lot of people then went through, training about how to deal with people from different ethnic backgrounds and so on, how to ensure that their lives were equal to those of the white stock and so on. And I think that from that, slowly, into wider society, we see it in football today, attitudes to apparent racial slurs on the football pitch. We've come a heck of a long way in the last 2 decades. But it is true that it's not, job done. It really is still work in progress, I think, for Britain. I think there are deep challenges, particularly in communities affected by high levels of immigration, where people feel that scarce resources are at stake, and often that will have a racial element. So I think there's still some real tension there. Of course, we saw the relative success of some of the parties like the British National Party in traditional white working class communities at previous elections. I do think, though, that overall, we've come a long way. One thing I would say is I think the August riots actually were at an interesting sort of corrective, in a sense. A lot of the research done into those riots suggested that it was police relationships with the black community that had, in some sense, sparked it. That stop and search, that familiar problem, is still at the heart of some of the tensions.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark Easton.
Coming up to